and welcome to Talking AI, a podcast about, you've guessed it, artificial intelligence. And each week we look at a different topic related to AI, whether that's an industry or a different specific topic that people are talking about. My name is Nikki Dean. I'm going to be your host for the series. I'm a technology presenter with a particular interest in AI. And my co-host, who you can see here, is the inimitable Dan Parkinson. He's the Director of Collaboration at Scan AI. That's a mouthful, isn't it? And he brings his real-life world experience here to the table. So it's a pleasure to have you back, Dan. Did I get the title right?
You did, yeah.
Fantastic. Right, today is all about robotics. So we've looked at some specific industries. Now we want to get into a particular topic. I'm going to ask a very, very obvious question, but so that we're making it clear from the off, what do we mean when we say robotics? Are we talking about robots or is it something totally different?
Okay, so there are sort of two tracks there. So robots and robotics are two sort of separate things, or they are starting to sort of be separated, especially when it comes to AI and that is an umbrella term. So we discussed that before. The AI covers machine learning, and then that's a further subset is deep learning.
You can catch that in episode 1. If you're kind of skipping ahead, we go over that in episode 1.
And if you are skipping ahead, why?
How rude.
In order. So robotics covers off other things that we've discussed before, like the automation side of it, that in a manufacturing, in a warehouse, where it is an actual proper robot or a robotic arm, some form of thing that's going to replace a job. But that's robotics itself. Robots are the humanoid things, the Terminators. Well, it's not necessarily the Terminator, but the humanoid style things. Now that, from an AI perspective, if you want to make it relevant, robotics is just a simple implementation of machine learning. So that's carrying out a repetitive instruction.
I'm with you. Okay, so maybe on like a factory line, say, for example, if there's something that needs to be done over and over, rather than have a human being, that's when you might bring in some form of robotics.
Yeah. And something that can be repeatable, that can replace low-level jobs, ease things, that automation piece. So that can have and does link into AI from a learning perspective to sort of help it improve. Robots are sort of the next level. And that is where you would see like this, a humanoid style being in a form of a robot. But that's an accumulation of all the different traditional types of AI, where you've got computer vision, so it can see what's going on and make predictions based off that. Then there's NLP, which is natural language processing. So that's the speech to text, it's the audio, it's understanding sentiment, the predictive text bit that we were talking about. And then the self-learning piece as well. So that's then bringing it together. So then that links into a new term called AGI, which is artificial general intelligence.
I don't know about that. What's AGI? You learn something new every day. See, I do have a particular interest in AI, as I said that at the top, but AGI is something that I haven't actually ever come across. So is this a new term, or because there is new terminologies all the time in this area, I have to say. If you've not immersed in it all the time, it can be really overwhelming, which is mainly why we've started this podcast. But what's AGI?
So again, I'm seen as an expert. I know and understand it. I don't deliver these systems personally. AGI it's where AI is potentially going to go, if you want to think of it that way. The short version. It's an accumulation of multiple technologies where it can self-think, self-learn. And again, it's that original. This is the coming full circle of where people think of AI. They think of the Terminator, that's going to be a robot that can think and make decisions based on its own and interact based off that. So that's general intelligence, or artificial general intelligence. So it's a self-aware, self-thinking piece of hardware, if you will.
Yeah, something else to Google later on for me notes.
We're not quite there yet. That's a lot of companies, and that's maybe why it's not necessarily as mainstream. It's been worked on for a long time. And again, if you think of it in terms of the breakdown of the different elements that make that up, the computer vision, the seeing piece, that is what a lot of people are working on right now. The NLP, a lot of people are working on that. So the different elements, and then the self-learning piece, that's being worked on. So I think NVIDIA actually did something, or they promoted a piece and used it at one of the GTC events a couple of years ago now, where they taught a program how to write music,
Yeah.
and then
Oh, it's incredible that. I've seen that
created
case
its own
study.
and they used that at GTC.
Yeah.
So that was AI generated. So that's the self-aware piece, really. So that's, again, it pulling everything together into one single functioning system, understanding, and then that's where we're starting to replace humans almost. Of, I understand that I can see you here, and I know that I need to talk to you, so I'm thinking about what I need to say to you, and marrying that vision with the audio piece.
Yeah.
So
if you haven't seen it, actually, you can get online and you can see. NVIDIA did some case studies. I think they were called I Am AI, and there's some really amazing ways that they were doing it. So, okay, I have an understanding of it. So it's kind of a new terminology for me anyway, whether our listeners will be familiar or whether it's something to look into. So let's go back to robotics then. How is AI implemented into robotics? How do we use it? What sorts of things, are going on in the background?
So I suppose general day-to-day people, you will be more the consumers of that technology at some point, or it may, again, it links back to the industry specific episodes where we've done where some of this may be implemented in a manufacturing process. We may have discussed it that Ocado have got a sort of a robotic automation picking and packing piece in their warehouses from a picking arm, so to speak. That can use AI to train to spot. There was, I forget the name of the company now, that there was a company that was working with Royal Mail a long time ago to sort of organise and automate the parcel line. So as that was coming in, it was reading the addresses, scanning it, picking, using the robotic arm to manoeuvre that and move it around and physically pick up the package and parcel to place it so that the label was in a very specific area so it then can be scanned. So it's being used. I've worked with other companies and startups that are using robotics for sorting waste materials, so picking out bottles from just general rubbish and litter. So from a robotics piece, yeah, it's more, again, maybe something that you won't see. We've talked about the robotic surgery and where that's going to go. So it's going to map into all different sectors, if you will. It's more all-encompassing from the robotics side, but that's been around for a long time from an automation piece. Again, if we look at AI as that umbrella term, machine learning is just a basic, I'm teaching you to do this because of this and look for this. So the automation side, machine learning, has been in robotics for a long time. Moving that into AI, that's now sort of applying a little bit of logic and learning and common sense to what it's actually going to do at the edge.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, isn't it, really? So where do we think that we're going to see robotics then? Big question here, but across eventually every industry, will there be an element of robotics in whatever form, whether it's something sort of very small right through to doing, whether it's building a whole car by itself, whatever, which I know some of that already happens. Do we think that we're going to see robotics applicable in every sort of industry and sector, or is that a big sweeping statement? It is.
It is. Future. But again, it sort of does link back to some of the stuff that we've discussed, where anything that can be automated is ripe for that sort of robotics piece, that robotics conversation. And yeah, I think a lot of industries do have that right now. There's certain things, like I said, building cars, great, that's got it. Building houses, I've seen.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen there's robots that taken, I forget which country it was implemented, but I've seen a video of a robot arm just feeding concrete and it's sort of drawing it almost like a 3D printer, but building houses for that. So yeah, anything that can be automated is open for that. I think, again, it's maybe just opening our eyes to see that it is probably already in use in a lot of places. That was so that the car industry, the car manufacturing industry, is one that you've highlighted. Then that's had that and gone through that process over the last couple of decades, really, where a lot of that has been automated and it's now assisted by robots. It's where things are going. That automation's been there again, like you said. That the car industry's been changed over the decades. That's gone from, again, just going back to that particular use case, that's gone from an industry that was purely built by hand to now the majority of it is built by robots, and it's almost a niche now that it's built by hand.
Well, I was going to say, I think sort of your luxury car brands would actually trade on that as a, there is a human being involved, or for the finer details. That actually marks you out now as being quite luxury, quite high end, the fact that there's an actual human being. Whereas once upon a time, that was quite commonplace, wasn't it?
Yeah, and now it's gone the opposite way around. It would have been many, many years ago a luxury of, oh, this is built by a robot and you pay a premium for that. Now that's the standard and norm. It's flipped, which I find that's completely interesting to see. Maybe that's where the entire world goes.
I always find it interesting when you see things like, I mean, I'm going off on a major tangent here, but just bear with me because it's kind of relevant. As in, when you see things and it might be a cake and it says hand iced, and I'm like, well, how else would it be iced? But it applies to that sort of thing, as in that handmade element. The implication that there's a human there actually becomes like prestigious, like there's an actual human involved. Like what that once upon a time was just how you all did it. You wouldn't differentiate by that, but
made by a person.
It's made by a person. I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Have you got any case studies then that you can share? Maybe some clients that are working with, and I know a lot of things have NDAs or things that we can't talk about, but just to give, I always like to have a tangible kind of, case study or example that we can give to our listeners so that they can actually get a real grasp on actually what we mean and how it's changing maybe a particular industry. So are there any case studies that you can share with us?
I suppose the bigger picture stuff is, and again, working within the realms of those NDAs, the bigger picture stuff is some of the work that we're doing with some of our partners on building these robotic surgeries. That's going to be transformational for the healthcare industry, and there's obviously a lot of transfer learning there that then can be passed on to other partners who want to replicate and implement some of that stuff. It's hard to sort of drill into one specific case study, again, without breaching NDAs and confidentiality. But I think, there's a lot of, so some of the startup partners are looking at different ways to implement and use robotics now, from the farming industry, from the food industry, from recycling, as I mentioned. And that's, again, something that has had, I suppose, the transition or the transformation is just adding that deep learning intelligence to what's already got the automation side of it. So the Royal Mail sorting piece as a real world example, that would have just been an arm to a track, like a Thomas the Train set. Thomas Tank Train set.
I like how you're making it visual for us all.
To sort of move and sort the parcels, and it goes to a human to then place that and then look at the label and then move it around. So I suppose the tangible is then they've now changed that, and other sorting facilities are available, but they're now using robotics to manipulate that package and parcel, to then scan that label with a computer to then see that needs to go in package A to then be sent off to this particular distribution hub, and they're automating a lot of that process. So that's one. I think from the physical robotics side and the warehousing, there's a lot going on there at the minute, and that links to another complete different tangent in Omniverse, where you can build this digital twin, you can replicate a warehousing environment and generate synthetic training content.
Okay, so just to stop you there, so if people don't know, NVIDIA Omniverse is a platform for collaboration. You love a bit of collaboration, don't you? Can you just sort of top line explain, if people haven't listened to previous episodes or aren't sure, what is Omniverse, and then we'll go more into that example.
Wow, what is Omniverse? So it's a couple of things. I suppose the key highlights are it's a collaborative design tool, where you can, multiple different engineers or artists work in different file formats, or different programs to then bring their own skill sets together so they can collaboratively work on a single platform. But it's also enabling the AEC industry, as a big early adopter of this at the minute, people to build digital twins. So that's a 3D representation of anything, really, like from a retail perspective, a physical superstore. And then they can play around with where the aisles are. They can physically move that and find the most optimal flow for traffic, for lighting, for logistics, for all of that. So but it's a lot of things. It's very early days. It's about 18 months into its actual life cycle. It's been talked about at the recent GTC. Yeah, that's I'm waffling a little bit now, but it's doing a lot of things.
It's a lot, isn't it? We've done quite a lot of work here for various different departments within Scan that can use Omniverse in different ways, and it is very difficult to tell people what it is. So sorry to put you on the spot,
No.
But it's essentially that, isn't it? Like you say, whereas traditionally you might have had engineers working with architects, working with designers, each using a different program software. You can bring it all into one program, so you can work on it in real time almost. So if I move this, I can do that. Saves a lot of time in theory, doesn't it? But it is still kind of early days, doesn't it?
And that's going to be used from, and again, just making that relevant and sort of, this isn't necessarily just an Omniverse podcast, but that can be used from a robotics perspective to build that 3D digital twin. So as we've talked about before, the main thing is getting training data for these robots or for any sort of deep learning algorithm, and having the majority of that getting all of that in real world examples is time consuming. So then being able to generate this 3D replica is a cost effective way of generating masses of training data that can then feed the robots and learn. I think BMW have done this as well. And I want to say they've used Omniverse in this way. If not, it does make sense that they should do, so I'll be contacting them.
So if you're watching, BMW, give us a shout.
But they've been able to, they've implemented robotics in the factories. So it was really good that you mentioned this, obviously the car industry. They've implemented that, but then built a digital twin of that factory and then been able to teach and train those robots how to move around the factory, how to find obstacles, what is an obstacle, when you encounter an obstacle, what to do. So it's used as an almost that training tool, an iterative process to teach the robot how to interact when you then go into a real world scenario.
It's crackers, isn't it? Why is it that in my head I can just imagine all these robots sat in a classroom taking notes as though, oh right, yeah, when you say training and learning. But essentially that's what it is, but they're not sat in the classroom, is it? It's that ability to use data to teach a robot how to do something eventually far more accurately than a human being. I mean,
again, just making it relevant, we split everything off into sort of 3 different workloads over at Scan. It's development, training and inference. And Ilan once said this, so our CEO, he said this, and it's always stuck with me, that he sees development and training as very much that teaching stage. You know, the development's more like a reception, and infants are juniors, and then your training's the high school, your college, your university. It's scaling it up and bigger and more purposeful training, and then the actual inference is sitting the exam. It's it's putting it into practice. Everything you've learned, you're actually doing it and giving the outcomes based off everything you've learned. So that's probably a good way of shaping the different styles of workloads and ways of looking at it.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Although I'd say inference for me is probably more when you get your first job and you realise I don't know anything.
And then you've got to go back to the development and training stages.
No, but I mean, jokes aside, it's a really good way actually of looking at about the different stages, isn't there? So it's not something that happens overnight.
No.
And there's oodles of data and training and tweaking the way that you feed that data to the robots so they eventually can do something to a stage that is acceptable, isn't it? Because if people are recognising that they need to start embracing and looking at how they can bring in robotics, whether you're a one-man band, a micro business. I don't literally mean a one-man band then, by the way. He looks at me and laughs, with the symbols.
I just picture it.
I know, we're both very visual. That's what I keep doing as well. So I'll rephrase, a micro business, I think they call it, where you have only a few employees and you don't have massive money to spend and invest. That's not to say it's not for you. So how can Scan, if you've got these questions, you think about, I don't know what questions to ask, I don't know where to start. How can Scan help you sort of start that journey, or maybe help you to decide whether robotics or a form of AI, deep learning, machine learning is for you?
I suppose that there's a plethora of technologies available out there, and there's a lot of free to access resources. The beauty of Scan is we simplify that journey. So whether you know what you need and know where you want to go, or whether you're at the opposite end of that scale, you know, we've got the skill set internally. We can approach that on a consultative basis of what do you want to achieve, why, you know, and sort of guide people through that process if they need that. You know, there's never any forceful guidance. We'll only ever offer advice, and it's, you know, on the partners, the clients, to sort of work with us and tell us what they need. It's you know, whenever I'm working with anyone, I sort of give them everything and say it's an all-you-can-eat buffet. Take as much or as little as you need from this. And it's that...
We're very northern here, obviously. That's very northern expressions here. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet. Get stuck in,
it's true. I mean, you know, we can offer everything from consultancy, from the hardware, from, you know, connecting you into all the partners, making it work, the actual configuration, deployment, management of that. And it's a sliding scale of how much do you need? Do you need us to just supply something? Do you need the full advice, the full package? Do you want us to guide you through that and then hand over the keys? You know, we can definitely make that process simple and easy.
I mean, obviously I do some work with Scan, but having one thing that I do love and that I would back up that you say there is that they're very accessible. So, you know, any questions that you have, they're not silly, you'll have heard them before. And what can be a really intimidating first step to make is made all that bit easier because of the reasons that you said. We're not going to say, yeah, brilliant, we've got this like £50 million solution for you. Well, I'm sorry, I'm out at the first, you know, I don't have that to spend. There are different sort of sliding scales of how you can get involved. And maybe it is just a conversation, a consultancy with somebody who knows to say, this is really probably all you need. This is what we can supply. It's not a hard sell, is it? It's a conversation about how we can help you and what it all means. And if you don't understand any of the expressions, because they can be intimidating, people use them differently, that's where I think the Scan team really come into their own, because they'll break it down and make it very easy to understand, so it's not intimidating.
And that we've shaped that engagement in that specific way, like you said. That, and I want to capitalise on something, a very specific word they said then, that there's no hard sell, that there's no selling, and we've shaped our engagements to be consultative and advice led. So we always start with that advice piece with no salespeople, you know, none of that. No commercials involved whatsoever, where we engage and we work with you to try and understand what you want and what you're trying to achieve as a business, to then provide you with that advice and guidance. And if you want to partner with us, then great, you know, we've got that skill set. So yeah, there's no question's a daft question. And again, it's part of the reason why we set this podcast up, to try and demystify and help people understand possibilities.
That's my philosophy in life. There's no such thing as a daft question, because chances are if you've got a question, the other people in the room have, haven't they? So be brave enough to sort of ask it, or, you know, look for advice. Okay, as we do, I'll leave it on a big open-ended question where I probably like dump you into the middle of the ocean here. But what is the future of robotics? Go.
Wow. So I think that AGI is where people are going to move towards. I suppose the closing statement, robots evolving, you know, that's becoming, the technologies that are making that up, they're, you know, getting a lot of attention and focus at the minute. They are evolving to become far more stable. I suppose that's where it's going to go. From the robotics side, let's see how and where. That's probably just going to become more apparent and more endpoints, I suppose, like the robotic surgeries or robotic shaves, you know, whatever that needs to look like. It's already there and in use. So I think that's just going to go through another phase of another industrial revolution, if you will. But yeah, the robot side that's going to be interesting. Maybe we'll see a prediction here of you know, a front of house, an actual physical robot there to, you know, I've come and you've made a reservation at a restaurant and you talk to a robot and they walk you to your seat.
I mean, it would be good for novelty, you know, if you've got kids and stuff, take them to, but not for the norm. I'm sorry, I'm taking a stand on that one. Right, well, thank you very much. Always insightful as ever. I know that we've got loads of interesting topics coming up. We're going to have some guests in as well. Cars is one that we're going to look at there, which I'm really interested in. I've got quite a lot to say on that because I love cars. But yeah, I look forward to chatting to you about that next time. Thank you very much as ever, and have a good one.
You too. Thanks very much.